Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Daily Gardener. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's July 15th. Let's start off today by talking briefly about bolting cilantro and how should you address it. Well, you can help delay when cilantro will bolt by planting it in part shade instead of full sun. You can keep the plant cool and moist with compost. And bear in mind that heat is a stressor. And when the plant is sensing its own mortality from that stress, cilantro will bolt more quickly. So hot weather is not your friend if you're looking to stop bolting cilantro. You can also buy a slow bolt cilantro variety and harvest the leaves more often to keep the stalks under control. Here's today's brevities. It's the birthday of the English architect Inigo Jones, who was born today in 1573. Jones introduced classical Roman architecture and the Italian Renaissance to Britain. Today, gardeners remember that Jones designed the layout for Covent Garden Square. The Duke of Bedford asked Jones to build a residential square using the Italian piazza for inspiration. The Duke felt he had to include a church, but he told Jones to put up something simple, like a barn. Jones' famous response was that the Duke would have the finest barn in Europe. Covent Garden Square became the chief produce market for Londoners. And it's the anniversary of the death of the botanist John Wilson, who died on this day in 1751. It was Wilson who first attempted a systematic arrangement of the plants of Great Britain. There's a little story that's often told about Wilson. Apparently, Wilson was so intent on the pursuit of botany that he was tempted to sell his cow in order to buy a book written by the Scottish botanist and taxonomist Robert Morison. The transaction would have caused Wilson's financial ruin had a neighbor lady not purchased the book for him. And there's one other story that reveals Wilson's self-taught expertise and personality. Wilson had traveled to the county of Durham, where he met a man who enjoyed growing rare plants. The man challenged Wilson to a contest of skill. The man thought himself superior to Wilson, and when he couldn't stump him with the names of the rarities in his garden, Wilson turned about and grabbed a wild herb, which the man simply dismissed as a weed. But Wilson stated that a weed was a term of art, adding that the explanation proved his antagonist to be a gardener, not a botanist. And that was the end of the contest. And it's the birthday of William Robinson, the originator of the herbaceous border and advocate for the wild garden. He was born on this day in 1838. Robinson helped change the English landscape from formal to much more relaxed and attainable for the masses. Robinson's work and books brought him financial security. By the age of 45, he had enough money to purchase the Elizabethan Manor of Gravetye, along with almost 200 acres of pasture and woodland. In 1896, Gertrude Jekyll offered this summary of Robinson's impact on gardening. Thanks to Robinson, we may see how best to use and enjoy the thousands of beautiful plants that have been brought to us by the men who have given fortune, health, and often life in perilous travel, that our gardens may be enriched and botanical knowledge extended. In Unearthed Words, today is the birthday of Almira Hart Lincoln Phelps, who was born on this day in 1793. Phelps taught at Amherst, and her book was undoubtedly known and used by Emily Dickinson, who was a student there. The following quotes show us that she was hip to the idea of mindfulness over 200 years ago. Here's what she wrote. How often are the beauties of nature unheeded by man, who, musing on past ills, brooding over the possible calamities of the future, building castles in the air, or wrapped up in his own self-love and self-importance, forgets to look abroad or looks with a vacant stare. And finally, each opening bud and care-perfected seed is as a page where we may read of God. Today's book recommendation is Classic Garden Design by Rosemary Verey. This 1984 book gives us a glimpse of just how much Verey learned from the gardens of the past with their topiary, knot gardens, and box-edged beds. All are incorporated in her Barnsley garden, providing a formal structure that's softened by roses and herbaceous perennials. Of course, one can't forget that it was Rosemary Verey who introduced and popularized the potager garden. You can get used copies of this book on Amazon with the link in the show notes for less than $6. Today's garden chore is to incorporate the perennial sweet pea into your garden. Sweet peas are some of the most romantic flowers, and while the sweet pea is considered an annual, there are a few perennial cultivars, but just keep in mind that the perennials lack the honeyed fragrance. Thomas Jefferson liked to grow this heirloom vine, also called everlasting pea. The vines can grow 9 to 12 feet tall and will offer up clusters of small white and pink blossoms. Everlasting sweet peas are an effortless cut flower. They practically arrange themselves. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. When I was researching William Robinson, I came across many different accounts of a story from his early days in horticulture. Robinson was working on the estate of an Irish baronet. One cold night, the fires for keeping the greenhouses warm failed. The reason was unclear. Whatever the particulars, whether he argued with his boss, forgot to tend the fire, acted in revenge, or what have you, the result was that the tender plants in the greenhouse died. That night, Robinson walked all the way to Dublin, which he did not reach until the following morning. When he arrived, he asked Dr. David Moore, head of the Botanical Garden, what he should do. Moore must have liked Robinson because he offered him a job on the spot, but not with the greenhouses. Instead, he was put in charge of the herbaceous plants that are hardy. They die back in the winter and return in the spring after their season of rest. These plants also included the English wildflowers. Both became his specialty. In any case, the truth remains that Robinson forever did not care for greenhouses, and he did not allow them at Gravetye Manor. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.